How's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. If we've seen it once in baseball, we've seen it numerous times in regards to players banking on having a big year in the final season leading up to free agency. And you have to wonder if that's going to be the case for New York Mets All-Star first baseman Pete Alonso. Now, Alonso is set to enter the final year of his contract with the Mets, and as it is unlikely that the All-Star and the team are going to get a deal done before the start of the upcoming season, the slugger will undoubtedly be looking for a big year at the plate in order to cash in next winter. Now, we've heard the recent comments of Mets president of baseball operations, David Stearns, who fully expects Alonso to become a free agent at the end of the upcoming season. The Scott Boras factor. And of course, now that Alonso is represented by the super agent, Boris has a thing and he has built his reputation on, not having his guys, negotiate before they hit free agency. He wants to get top dollar and then some for his clients, and that's his job as their representative. And Alonso is not going to be any different on that. Now, after hearing what Stearns had to say, are the Mets calling Alonso's bluff, or is there a possibility that 2024 will be his last year in Flushing? Some other questions. Would the Mets trade Alonso this summer? And that's very interesting. I say this because Alonso is a fan favorite in Queens, and he's just 61 home runs shy of becoming the franchise's all-time leader in the category, a number that has stood now for over 30 years. As 252 is a magical number if you think about the Mets, because Darryl Strawberry, he's the all-time leader for the franchise in the home run category. Now, in looking at Pete Alonso, could we bank on him having a big time season like Aaron Judge did a couple of years ago for the New York Yankees? You think about Yankees general manager Brian Cashman, not paying Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge went out there and hit more than 60 home runs, was the AL MVP, and it actually cost the Yankees about $100 million more than if they had, taken care of Judge prior to the season. I'll tell you like this: you look at Alonso's numbers, um, his season averages. He's a 251 career hitter. He averages 45 home runs a year, 118 runs batted in. And with the exception of the shortened 2020 COVID year, this guy's gone yard at least 35 times in each season. And 2021 was actually the only season in which, he didn't, hit at least 40 home runs and drive in 100 runs batted in. He's a guy that's going to hit about 260. And you think about it being that it's his walk year, he'll probably get that up to 275. I think he flirts with hitting 50 home runs again. He did it his rookie year with the New York Mets, and I think Pete Alonso wants to go out there and show his value, on the on the market, if you will, because he's looking to cash in. Now, I will say this: Stearns is running the front office for the Mets now, and it's one of those where he's not attached at the hip with anybody. He's basically inherited most of the guys on this team. And when you have a situation like that, you're going to try to run your system the way that you want it. Now, it's a very interesting and contrasting styles here because, Stearns, built his reputation, running the Milwaukee Brewers front office. And of course, the Brewers, one of these smaller market teams in Major League Baseball, they kept it close to the chest. They did things on a budget. We've seen the Mets do that so far this offseason and for different reasons. The Mets set a record with their payroll last year, and they're paying guys this year that aren't even on the team. You figure Justin Verlander is getting about $20 million from the New York Mets, and he's not with them. He's back with the Houston Astros, and the same thing could be said about Max Scherzer. And this is just a couple of guys who the Mets are on the books for in regards to this season. So you look at it, of course, the Mets have basically had a no frills approach if you will, this offseason. It's one of those where, you can't have a big spending offseason each year like they did last year, which is to be understood, even though you're a big market club. But, you still got to wonder if Pete Alonso is going to be a Met lifer. From the outside looking in, and I'll say it like this: I think that Mets team owner Steve Cohen doesn't have a problem paying Pete Alonso. I think what could be the hiccup on this deal could be years. And again, outside looking in, I don't have any inside information on this, but I could see the Mets, hypothetically be willing to give Pete Alonso about 30, maybe $35 million a year. But if he's seeking 10 years, maybe they're only looking at 6 or 7. We don't know. But it's going to be a very interesting thing. You also have to look at it next year in free agency. How many big market teams are going to be willing to pay Pete Alonso the big bucks and give him the long term deal? That's other factors that you have to look in as well. I don't think that the Mets should just go into this thing and just be like, well, we could offer Pete Alonso whatever we want and we'll be okay. No, there's going to be somebody else out there that's definitely going to talk to the slugger. And then there's a Steve Cohen factor. I mean, Steve Cohen, I do believe, wants Pete Alonso with the Mets long term. I don't think that he's going to try to overstep uh, and try to, like, undercut, if you will, what David Stearns is trying to do with the front office. But at the same time, Steve Cohen is a businessman. And I say this because he knows that he needs somebody that people are going to want to come out to his stadium and see. And I know that Francisco Lindor is right now the highest paid Met. Brandon Nimmo has a big contract, Kodai Senga and several others. But Pete Alonso is really the star attraction, if you will, right now, after so many guys have been traded or left in free agency in recent years from the Mets. He's a homegrown guy from the Mets. Again, like I said, he's a fan favorite. And I guarantee you, even if the Mets are out of it this summer, if you trade Alonso, well, you know what? Basically, you're telling your fan base more than likely you're not competing in 2025. And I know that there's some guys out there that are going to say, hey, just blow it up, trade him and see what you can get back. But then you still got to give people a reason to come out to the park. It's one of those where, and CJ, you'll appreciate what I'm about to say. You know, the Mets got to look at it like this: the Braves in that division are light years ahead of you. So are the Phillies. It's one of those where, the Washington Nationals are rebuilding, and the Miami Marlins just made the postseason last year. You only won 75 games. You got a first year manager. You're in a transition as you're focusing more on analytics and sabermetrics, which is why, Buck Showalter in the front office butted heads. It's one of those, though. You have to ask yourself, if you're the Mets, how close are you being a contender? And if that's the case, you also have to look at it, of course, with that additional wild card spot. You could win 85 games and you can get on a run in the postseason. Just look at the Arizona Diamondbacks last year. Just look at the Philadelphia Phillies in the previous year. But in my opinion, you're not doing that without having a guy like Pete Alonso in the middle of your lineup. I think one of the things that hurt Alonso, last year is the fact that, hey, the Mets really didn't give him a lot of protection in that lineup in the heart of their order. As a team, the Mets did not hit well last year. But nonetheless, it's one of those where we could possibly be seeing Pete Alonso play his last games with the Mets this summer. Anything's possible, anything's up in the air. Again, like I said, I really don't think that the money is the problem. I think the years could be the problem. It's one of those where we just got to wait and see. But I'll tell you like this: uh, Scott Boras is infamous for, his negotiating ploys, and you also look at the fact that, hey, some of his big name guys still haven't been signed yet, and pitchers and catchers are reporting in both Florida and Arizona as we speak. But nonetheless, it's going to be a very interesting year to see how things turn out for Pete Alonso. I don't expect negotiations to go on between him and the Mets between now and spring training or the start of the season. I do think he's going to have a big year. How big of a year? we got to wait and see. But I'll tell you like this: the bigger the year that Pete Alonso has, of course, that price tag goes up. And if Pete Alonso can help the Mets get to the postseason this October and possibly make a run, you know what? The Mets are just simply going to have to open up the vault. That's just the way that it is. But folks, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank all of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. CJ, what's going on? Real quick before I chime off, like I said, pitchers and catchers are reporting. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I do think the Braves once again will have a very strong team. But like we've seen in recent years, the month of October is simply a crapshoot. But nonetheless, I think you and the folks down in the ATL and in that area are definitely in store for some good baseball this year. But once again, fine folks, this is William Martin signing off and saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.